there's a lot of examples in the Bible that talk about focusing on what is best. And for me, that is investing in my relationship with God. And in a lot of ways, like you mentioned, that means investing in right now and not in what's happening in the future in 30 years from now.
Welcome to the Hope in Real Life podcast with Jason Gore. Our team is passionate and committed to bringing you more hope in the everyday, real areas of your life. If this conversation and content is valuable for you, please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and even share. You never know how valuable it could be to share a little bit of hope with someone else. Let's get the conversation started. Well, welcome to this episode of Hope in Real Life. I am here with a young man that I would call a friend. I've had the privilege of watching this.
Maybe a nephew.
maybe a nephew, probably close to a nephew, but also a friend who I've had the privilege of walking alongside a bit growing up. And, we talk about this in life right now. The world is desperately looking for hope. And so we're going to take in a spin on this. We're just bringing someone on the show who, in a day and age where it seems like we're hearing every time we turn around, mental unhealth is at an all-time high, especially amongst young people, and lacking purpose and lacking direction. We wanted to bring a young man on the show that actually seems to be swimming upstream in spite of that. And so Seth Sullivan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Glad to have you here. Why don't we do this? Let's just out of the gate. Why don't you just give a brief description of who you are, where you are in life, and what's going on?
Well, I'm currently a senior in high school, but, rising college freshman at NC State. Go Pack already. It feels kind of crazy to say that now.
In fact, tomorrow's your last day of school.
Yeah,
tomorrow that's how close.
Is literally my last day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be going to NC State to major in agriculture business management. Super excited about that. I own a business called Thrive Plants, where I grow and sell house plants and teach people how to grow plants themselves. And that's what I'm hoping to pursue with my education.
So in a world where we hear that young people are finding difficulty finding purpose and direction, we've got a young man who's graduating with honors, headed to NC State, and already has a business. And so entrepreneurship is already under his wings. Let's jump right to it, Seth. What factors do you believe, because we're talking about this idea of hope in a potentially hopeless world or hopeless situation, what factors do you think in today's world contribute to a potential overall sense of hopelessness?
Yeah, just to speak from my young adult context, I think one of the biggest things, going into college, or even if you're a young adult who's maybe not going to college and you have other options after you graduate high school, I think that one of the main pressures that we have is seeking a purpose and planning your future. And I just want to say, probably for the past 6 months-ish, number one question I've been asked is, what are you going to do after high school? What are you going to do after college? What do you want to do with your life? Those kinds of things. So it can be a lot of pressure. And I think that uncertainty is one of the main things that contributes to people's hopelessness, because I think there's a gap in between. Uncertainty is one thing. How can we ever be certain of anything, especially when you're talking about 30 years down the road, right, 20 years down the road, whatever. There's a gap between that and hopelessness, though. And so I just want to say, it is definitely possible for you to be uncertain, but to still have hope.
So what is it that gives you that hope that others might be looking for? Despite the fact that there can be a lot of pressure to know what's next, or to know how much, what are you going to do for the next 30 years of your life? And you said that kind of creates a gap, that uncertainty. What is it that you can actually focus on that can actually bring you hope in the midst of that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that goes along with that uncertainty, especially for young adults, is loneliness. And that word can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, but I think in this specific context, it really goes into there's this weird feeling of when people ask a question what do you want to do when you grow up? What plans do you have for the future? And maybe chances are you don't have an answer. In a lot of ways, I don't exactly have an answer for that when people ask me. And I think part of the pressure is there's not a lot of people who can necessarily relate to you in that feeling as a young adult, or it can at least seem that way. If you look at people who are maybe in their 30s or 40s, they might be in a completely different life situation, and sure, like they've been there before. They've obviously been a young adult before, but it may have looked a lot different, or they might not have experienced the same feelings. And then if you even just go to like a junior in high school, a sophomore in high school, they've never been through that experience before where people are exactly asking them, hey, what are you going to do next year? What are you going to do in 5 years, in 10 years? So there's not a lot of people you can turn to. But I think the main thing that's like the most important is people being able to find a community around them that can experience those same kinds of things together. So for me, as someone who's 18 years old, if I can find a community of people that's my same age, sharing a lot of similar experiences, that can kind of help me have, first of all, just like a group of people to be able to talk to and go through the same things together, but also for us to just be an encouragement to one another too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit on something big right now, because in today's world, isolation is a big thing. And I think what I see, especially in some young people, is they don't actually recognize how social media like seems like you're connected to a lot of different people, a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different ideas.
Yeah.
But if there actually is something true to what you just said, finding community, like finding real people that you can connect with, if we don't live into that, man, it makes sense why we would experience a bit of hopelessness. One thing I know, and this is going to be off topic here for a second, but I know about you. I mean, so you've got great parents, in my opinion, and not perfect. You would probably be the first to be able to attest to that, but great parents. You got a cell phone sometime around high school, I think, maybe just before.
I got a cell phone in 7th or 8th grade.
7th or 8th grade. But it seems like I remember a time where, like, whether there was a game or something like that, like you felt like, you know what, maybe I'm just a little bit too tied to this cell phone or to this game, and you made some changes in kind of your approach to whether it was social media or that game. Could you talk about that for a minute, or maybe the impacts of social media and what you do and don't do and why?
Yeah, so I believe it was during COVID and during this time where we were at home for school all the time, and I felt like I didn't even notice it happening, but before I knew it, I was just like on social media all the time, like wasn't even paying attention to any of my classes, and I convinced myself that it was okay because like it didn't really matter. I was getting good grades. I had all A's still because class was just like super easy during that time. And yeah, I mean, long story short, I convinced myself that it was okay, and every time I would just find myself like wasting time on social media. And so finally one day, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I just remembered like this terrible feeling like I had just like wasted all this time, and I wasn't like building relationships with anyone, much less just like even spending time with my family. And so I ended up deleting all the social medias that I had at the time, including YouTube. I wasn't on YouTube at all for a while either. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is, I mean, you mentioned one of the ways that you can find hope in a world that could otherwise seem hopeless is through finding a community. But you also talked about this idea of purpose. One of the things that I've seen in your life that it seems like you do really well is you just tackle what's in front of you. Like whatever the day is, you go about it with discipline. You make a plan every week. It sounds like when I hear from your mom and dad, you know what it is that you're supposed to do each day, and you just get up and do it. And I think so many people can get caught up in that question of, hey, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And you forget, man, that can just be, you can just drown in that versus and realizing like, you know what I need to do today? I need to take care of today. And it's something that you do really, really well that you don't see a ton of folks doing that I think we could all, even myself, could probably learn from a bit.
And that's a way where I think both for me, the foundation of the way that I grew up and was parented, as well as just my foundation, my faith has kind of had a big impact on me. There was a story that my parents, like, they talked about a lot when I was growing up. It's in the Bible, and it's this passage where Jesus is over in the house of Mary and Martha, and Martha is, she's cooking up dinner, she's making all the preparations or whatever, and she's getting a little stressed. There's a lot to do to prepare, and Mary's over here just listening and talking to Jesus, which is, sounds like crazy to say that. She's just over here listening to Jesus, just like we're right here. But eventually Martha comes in and she's like, Mary, like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you helping me? There's so much to do. And long story short, Jesus, there's this beautiful act where Jesus just responds with grace towards Martha, but also presents her with this truth that what she's doing is good. Obviously, like, if you're going to have dinner, you should be cooking food. It's really important. Yeah. But Mary is investing in what is best in that situation. And so for me, like, that story just laid this foundation of focusing on what's best, which in many cases is just right now in the moment. It doesn't matter like 30 years in the future. All of that is uncertain. And I think the main thing that distinguishes between that uncertainty and hopelessness for the future is your ability to just focus on what is best right now, be in the moment, listen to what God is trying to tell you right now. So
yeah, man, that's a good word. Let's do this. Can you talk about, since we're talking about hopelessness and hope in the midst of that, can you just talk about a time in your life where you had maybe experienced a bit of hopelessness?
Yeah. I already touched on it a little bit, but I don't think it was necessarily one specific event. But like I mentioned before, I'm a senior in high school, and for much of the first semester of my senior year, it was very stressful. Like, obviously that's the time of year, November to December-ish is the time of year where we had to make a decision on where we were going to go to college and what we wanted to even do in college. And I think the hardest part about that is right now we live in this culture where it's like decisions are glorified almost. It's like if you're not sure where you're going to college, it's like, I mean, people aren't going to maybe be directly mean about it. But if you're not sure where you're going to go to college or what you're going to do in college, it's like, you should probably figure that out. You know?
Like uncertainty could be viewed as not having it all figured out yet, which could be negative.
Right. Yeah. And so that was a lot of stress, and just combined with all the side things that were like, hey man, it's your senior year. Like, are you going to get involved in athletics? Are you going to do something fun for your senior year? Are you going to invest in these relationships that you only have a few more months left to hang out with?
Yeah. So again, you're a young man that seemingly goes into this world with optimism every day. We've got, like, you turn on the news, you turn on social media, we have domestic issues, we have global issues. You hear the world is constantly changing. I can remember when I was your age, I used to hear from people regularly, namely my parents and grandparents, other people that age. Hey, well, back when I was growing up, the world was X, Y, and Z, and the world's such a different place. And the world's changing so much faster
Always.
even now. Like, how do you balance that, like, understanding and being informed with what's going on domestically, globally, but not letting that overwhelm you as a young man that doesn't really know what the world's going to look like tomorrow?
Yeah. I think that it's like this weird phenomenon with that we do with ourselves. It's like this confirmation bias of hopelessness that a lot of people have. And in a
Can I just repeat that again? So the statement is this confirmation bias of hopelessness, meaning one person describes a situation or declares a situation as negative or hopeless, and then someone else does it, and maybe the media does that, and then all of a sudden we're just supposed to believe that things are negative and hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then recognizing, okay, and so what's your response to that?
Yeah, and like you said, the media plays a huge role in that. I mean, we wake up in the morning, and for many of us, the first thing we do is turn on the TV and look at all the bad things that happened yesterday, and look at all the wars and domestic issues that happened like last week, last month. And so I think in a lot of ways that plays like a big part in us just having this bias all around us to to a feeling of hopelessness for the world.
Hope in Real Life family, I want to take a moment and let you know about a resource that we have for you for your own personal development, spiritual enrichment, and really a way for you to find a bit more hope in real life. We have a tool for you called the Hope in Real Life app. It offers things like parenting tips, financial resources, marriage insights. If you're looking for it, there's even Bible reading plans in there. And there's a community where you can even share prayer requests and know that someone is praying for you for whatever it is that you have going on in your life. It's available right now in the Apple App Store or in Google Play. You can search Hope in Real Life in both stores, or you can use the download link that is in the show notes. Remember, tomorrow can be better than today, and hope is possible even in real life. And look, I just want to recognize we got a young man on the show right now that it's very possible some of our listeners will be like, oh, a 19-year-old, do they really have anything for me? And I'm telling you, I live in a world that says not only is that generation not hopeless, I think we're going to be hopeless if we don't recognize the value that your generation has. Like, there are young voices out there that I believe are as impassioned or more impassioned than any generation that we've seen to actually see the world move into a positive direction. And, the Bible actually even says, hey, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. And so I just want to, man, as we continue in this time together, I want to applaud you for being able to be at your life stage and to have a mindset of like, hey, I don't have to worry about tomorrow. I need to worry about today. Tomorrow is going to take care of itself. To be able to say, hey, yeah, I understand there's negative things that are going out there that are beyond my control, but I'm going to focus on what I can take care of. And I'm telling you, from what I've seen in my life, if all of us would just worry about what's in front of us and what we can put our hands to right now, things around us would be much better off. And so I applaud you for that, Seth.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you are a man of faith. Let's talk about how your faith influences this idea of hope or optimism in your life.
Yeah. So for me, honestly, faith is in a lot of ways the foundation for any hope that I do have. And just like I talked about before, like there's a lot of examples in the Bible that talk about focusing on what is best. And for me, that is investing in my relationship with God. And in a lot of ways, like you mentioned, that means investing in right now and not in what's happening in the future in 30 years from now. And the only way that we can truly have hope for the future or hope to make a difference in this world is if we focus on right now. Because how are we supposed to say, how are things going to be better in 30 years if we don't start putting our shoulder to the plow right now?
Yeah. So you obviously interact with a lot of young adults, whether it's high school. I know you're involved with other ministries here at Hope. You're involved in other things out into the community. What role do you think young adults play in creating a more hopeful and positive future? If you had a young adult listening right now and they're like, man, I want to be a part of making this place, the world around me better, what recommendations would you give, or what role do you think they can play in making that happen?
Yeah. So I think the main thing is, we talked about global and domestic issues a second ago. I think it's really important to have this balance where it's important to be informed of what's going on in the world, because how can you possibly understand how to make a difference if you don't know where you're making a difference or where the needs even exist in. But also to have another foot behind you in this community that's going to help build you up and keep you hopeful. And so I think, Jesus talks about in the Bible being a light in the darkness, or being a hope to others in a world where a lot of things feel hopeless. But the truth is, like, how can we be a light in the darkness if we ourselves don't go into the darkness? So I think it's important to take a step into the darkness, and our light's only going to shine in those dark places. But also, like I mentioned before, just being able to keep a foot back in this community that's going to help build you up and keep you hopeful as well.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is make sure you're connected to a community that can actually keep you going strong.
Yes.
But at the same time, don't sit back in that. Like, we actually have to be willing to take a step into the darkness, into the hopelessness, to actually bring hope into the places and spaces around us. I want to kind of go off script here for a minute. I know we've been speaking a lot to young adults, and what that world looks like, and how, with the uncertainty that's ahead, and how to approach that and find hope. I also know we have a lot of listeners that might be a little past that young adult stage, and maybe they've got kids at home, and they would, every now and then we'll have folks on the show that are living the parenting experts world, and so they have all kinds of things to say about how to parent, what to do, what not to do. I would say you're a young man, while again not perfect. Man, you're in a pretty good spot in life, all things considered. And so, what would you say from a parenting aspect has been valuable for you to be able to get on and to stay on the path that it looks like that you're on right now? What words of encouragement would you have to the parents that are listening?
Yeah. Just in my experience, it wasn't a lot of, on my part, it wasn't a lot of like disciplinary action, all that kind of stuff. Like, it wasn't really.
Yeah, I've never seen your dad beat you or anything.
Yeah, it didn't have a lot to do with, when I like.
Maybe your mom, but not
maybe. Yeah. When I did things wrong, I wasn't getting like beat over the head. But I think honestly, like, more than anything, it was just my parents were always someone, or always people that I could look up to in any situation, and they were just so disciplined in like almost every aspect of life. So disciplined, and I really looked up to that. It was more that they were just an incredible example to me.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't worry about punishing me or rewarding me. There wasn't a lot of worry in that. It was just like, we're just gonna do our best to be, to have the healthiest marriage that we can, to stay connected with God as closely as we can, and stay disciplined in these areas of our lives. And for me, and I can probably speak for Brady too, that was just,
for those listening, Brady is his younger brother.
Yes. For us, that was just something that we both are able to look up to, almost like really close friends who are just super responsible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super responsible. Maybe we'll have your parents on and just make sure. I mean, I could see that in you, but Brady's probably still got a bit of work to do.
He's got a couple years.
He's got a couple years. That's right. Another thing I've seen with your parents is they both take very seriously just spending time with you guys. And what's interesting is, while you say they're people that are very disciplined and that you can look up to, I know if they were on here right now, they would both say that they're far from perfect. And what I've seen in them is an ability and a willingness and almost a desire to live life together, to not pretend, but to live life together with you and your brother. And even when they do mess up, to be pretty quick to own that too.
Yeah.
And to model that and say, hey, listen, that probably was a bit out of bounds. I could have handled that differently. And I've just seen that play out in some really significant ways in your life and in Brady's life as well. Hope in Real Life family, we just want to take a moment and let you know about a resource that is available to you. I know a lot of our listeners aren't necessarily active in a church, might not even be a Christian. We are still thankful that you're spending time with us. However, we do get asked regularly, how can we find out more about your church or even just about this Jesus guy? And so if that is you, I want you to know you can tune in to gethope.tv. We have live services on Saturday, 4:15 p.m. and 6 p.m., or on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. or 11:15 a.m. Those are Eastern Standard Times. If you can't tune in during those times, we will drop our YouTube link as well as our podcast link down in the show notes. We would love to have you join in with us. Let's keep sharing some hope. Okay, fun question here for you. So you mentioned earlier you are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You've started a business called Thrive Plants.
Yes.
And I would love for our listeners just to hear a little bit about that. Like, what was the heartbeat behind that? What made you want to get into what is it that Thrive Plants does? What led you to get involved with that? And then what led you to move that past a hobby and into actually starting a company? And then you might forget these questions. And I'd love to hear like what your hope is for the future for Thrive Plants.
Yeah.
So what got you into it?
So as I'm sure you know, mental health or mental unhealth rather is something that is very detrimental to just the world that we live in right now. It's a big deal, and so that's where a lot of the foundation of where my business is actually from. I grow and sell houseplants, and you might be like, what does that have anything to do with like mental health? But the truth is, there is actually research.
Sounds a lot less stressful than some of the things I do. Maybe it would be more mentally healthy for me.
Well, you know, you get outside and you water a greenhouse for an hour. It's a lot better than sitting at your desk. But seriously, there's a lot of proven research on, first of all, just the benefits of plants to people's mental health and their ability to cognitively replenish themselves. And so a lot of the focus of my business has to do with not only selling people plants, which are going to give them those benefits, but also educating people on how to grow plants themselves so that they can share those experiences.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about some things you've done. I think you've done some things, whether and I could be wrong here, but maybe it's with birthday parties or something like that, or get-togethers for young kids, or you actually teach them?
So we had, you may have seen, if you were in one of our services recently, there was a video about Priority Farm, and we had an event there.
Okay.
The Fostering Hope, I forget what it was actually called. It was a Fostering Hope event, and I had the opportunity to come and bring I brought like a bunch of plants and then like these decoration supplies, and we just let the kids have at it with all these craft supplies and these plants, and we did this craft where they would take a little pumpkin. It was around Halloween. So they took this little pumpkin and they cut open the top of it as you would for like a jack-o'-lantern or something, dug out all the stuff, and then planted a bunch of plants inside of it, and it actually looked really cool. So I stole the idea and sold a few of them. It was super cool. But yeah, it was just great to see. And the kids were like so happy.
It's a great rule of business, by the way. Ahmad, I know you can attest to this. Every good idea doesn't have to be yours. But how can you take it, innovate, and scale it? That's how you make some money. All right. Yeah. Anyways, go ahead. That's a different podcast.
Right. So yeah, that's just one example. But there's been a lot of times when I've been able to come to events, and what I actually enjoy doing more than just like selling stuff is being able to come and like just watch the joy on people's faces whenever we're doing like a class or a workshop on just like transplanting something. And you're like, wow, this is so, and for me, it's like, I literally do it every day. So it's just like, oh yeah, you just like do this, whatever. And then these people show up and they're like, this is so amazing. Like, I can't believe this. And I'm like, it really is amazing, I guess. Like, but it's super fun.
So what about long term? What do you hope for Thrive Plants? Don't let me say 30 and cause hopelessness or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm getting into too much uncertainty. But, you know, what do you hope Thrive Plants looks like 5 years from now?
I think that I really am intending to keep the focus on people and making a positive difference in people's mental health. How I'm exactly going to go about that from year to year, not exactly certain. And my hope is to let God kind of take the lead on that. But what I really want to make it about is using this gift that God has given me on a lot of knowledge about plants and a lot of passion for growing things, and be able to use that to make a difference on other people.
Well, man, great young man, great business idea, and I know you're doing some great things. If some of our listeners were interested in, hey, how can I support this business, or how can I buy some plants from Thrive for my own home and increase my own mental health? How do they follow you? How do they track you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. You can follow @PlantsThatThrive or go to thriveplants.org.
Okay.
And that's where you can buy a bunch of plants if you want.
All right, and we'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. Hey, listen, what I really hope our listeners get, and this is for you, Seth, and it's also for our listeners, is, man, we live in a world right now where hopelessness, it does permeate. It is elevated. You know, I heard someone say, John Deloney, who's been on the show before, actually was talking to Dave Ramsey, and he said, we live in a culture right now where, like, it's actually frowned upon to celebrate. Like if you celebrate good things, it's almost like you're bragging or you're a bad person or you're elevating yourself. It's like the only thing we can really talk about are the negative things, or if we're struggling, and then it's like, okay, let me lean in and listen, and as if that's okay. And man, when I see young men like yourself, I'm reminded like, no. There are young people out in the world that actually are handling their business the right way that should be celebrated. And until we get to a place to celebrate those that actually are making a difference in a positive way, we're going to lose sight of the fact that it's even possible, much less that it's actually happening. And so I would say if you have young people in your home, goodness gracious, don't lose sight of the fact you are not there just to babysit. You are there to equip and to empower and to remind them, not to let them get distracted by the uncertainty of the world, but just to say, hey, chase after what it is that God has put in front of you today. How can we make today better for ourselves and for those around us and for the things that God has entrusted to us? And for goodness sakes, don't look down on someone on this next generation because, man, to be quite honest, I believe your generation, Seth, understands what is going on in the world around us. And not only that, but how we can actually adapt to be able to make a difference and to impact in ways that even my generation can't. And so to parents, to those that are hiring young people, I would say, goodness gracious, find a way to continue to equip and empower and let them run. And to folks like you, to young folks, and I hate to say young, I mean, you're about to go to college and so don't, I know you
It's okay.
Positively, but man, don't settle for the status quo. Don't stop. Keep making the impact that God has created you to make. And it's been a blessing, again, for me to watch you in this life and to see what you do. So thanks so much. Yeah, man. Keep following, stay humble, but keep chasing after what it is that God has for you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of Hope in Real Life. Listen, if you've heard something that you think would be valuable for, maybe it is a young adult that's in your life, maybe it's for a parent that has some young kids at home that you think, hey, they would really benefit from hearing this, please don't just listen. Take an opportunity to share this with somebody. You never know what a difference it can make when you take a moment to just share some hope. Look forward to seeing you on future episodes. We'll drop all the show notes down to make sure you can follow Seth. Thank you again for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
I'm sure I'll see you probably at my house sometime.
Probably.
All right. Love you guys. We will see you next time. Let's keep sharing hope. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hope in Real Life podcast. If this content was valuable for you, don't forget, like, subscribe, share. You never know how important it could be to bring a little hope into someone else's life. There's even a place here for you to comment. We would love to hear from you and hear your feedback. Until next time, let's keep sharing hope.